We are live.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. So today is day 3 of our Heritage Week, and today Riddhi Joshi, that's me, and I'll be talking about a very, very interesting site of Maharashtra, and that is the port of Chaul. So I'll just share screen and then we start. Okay. Yogini, is the screen visible?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So as I said, I will be talking about a very, very interesting site, and that is Chaul. So what we are going to do today is we are going to travel in time. We'll go to the 2nd century BC, and then we'll come almost till the 1900s and even to the present period. And we are going to look at Chaul from that perspective. Okay, so where is Chaul and what are we exactly talking about? So Chaul basically is a small town which is in the south of Alibag Taluka today. So if you can see it in the map, I'll just open the pointer. Okay, so this is the port of Chaul over here. You can see it is on the west coast of India, very close to the Arabian Sea. And it's a very small town. It's 60 kilometers from the south of Mumbai. And it is located on the mouth of the Kundalika River. So what we have to understand is when we talk about any port city or any port site, it's not how we imagine it today. It's not like the JNPT or any other port site as we imagine it today. It is usually a little inland towards the mouth of a river. So as we all go ahead, I'll show you some other maps also, and it will be more clear that how is it a very important port. So this is the location, as you can see in the map. It was also known as Champavati in the ancient period because of the presence of a lot of champa trees here. Also, Chaul has a very interesting mythological reference. So it is mentioned as Revati Kshetra. Revati Kshetra because the wife of Balaram, who is the elder brother of Krishna, she comes from here, and that's why it is called as Revati Kshetra. Her name was Revati. So that's how you get the reference of Chaul in mythology. Moving ahead now, let's see Chaul from the 2nd century BC onwards. So we will be talking about starting from the 2nd century BC because we get archaeological evidence from the 2nd century BC. So the first evidence that we get over here is the archaeological context. The excavations conducted here in 2003 and 2005 by the Deccan College have gotten very, very interesting results. So we have habitation going back to the 2nd century, even the 3rd century BC, if not more. There have been underground structures that have been found. And it also tells us that, yes, there was a huge scale of people who were living there. At the same time, it also tells us that, yes, there were a lot of ring wells which have been found. So again, it takes you back to the type of habitation that existed in Chaul at this point of time. A small underground wall has also been found, which is 1 kilometer away from the present day site of the river, which obviously the site of the river has changed, the course of the river has changed, but it tells you that, yes, it was a very, very important port at that time. So basically, I was doing this as a part of my research for my MA dissertation thesis. But when I started with the research, I only knew about this, nothing else. And I was really confused that I have taken such a topic, whether I will get data. But once I started doing research, the sheer amount of data that started pouring in was something that now I've been adding to it, and still the data has not come to an end. So some of it is what I'll be telling you all today. So again, going back in time, so Chaul has caves going back to the 1st century CE. Now these caves today are again in Chaul, but they are housing a temple of the Hinglaj Devi. Now I'll come back to this reference of Hinglaj Devi in a short while, but these caves are Buddhist caves. We can understand it by the presence of a stupa, which you can see over here. This is a detail of this part. So the presence of a stupa tells us that, yes, these were Buddhist caves and they are datable to the 1st century CE. Similarly, there are very close to this site is another place called as Agra, which is in the vicinity. And again, over here, we have found some Buddhist caves, which also date back to the 1st, 2nd century CE. Now, these are what we actually find, the physical evidences. Now, what about the written evidences? So, earliest mention of Chaul is found at inscriptions all the way in Borivali, that is in Mumbai today, in the Salsette Island, in Kanheri caves. So, this is a picture of Kanheri caves. I've just put it here so that you understand what place I'm talking about. So, there are inscriptions. There are at least 4 inscriptions which talk about these caves, this place over here in the caves. And there are 2 inscriptions, very, very interestingly. The first one is by a person called as Sula Dattasa, who gives a donation of a water cistern or a podhi. And another reference is by another person called as Dhammanakasa, who has given the donation for a road. Both of them, their names are mentioned in Kanheri. And what we understand over here, that they are 2 sons of the same person, because they mention their names, the names of their father, whose name is Rohini Mitra. They also go on to explain that Rohini Mitra was a jeweler or a goldsmith who came from a place called as Chemula. And Chemula is nothing but Chaul. So that's another reference in writing that we find from Chaul. Similarly, there are 2 more inscriptions which date back to the 5th century CE, which also mention about the donations coming from residents of Chemula, once again Chaul. All these inscriptions are in the Brahmi script in the Prakrit. So these are the written references. Now coming to references from all around the world. So Ptolemy's Geographia, somewhere dated around the first 150 CE, calls this port as Simula or Timula. So once again, they are talking about this port, which tells us that yes, it was very, very important. So Ptolemy also mentions that he gained information about Western India from people who had come from Simula to Alexandria, which means that yes, people were traveling far and wide from a place known as Chaul. Now, I'm very, very sure that this place is something which is not greatly discussed as far as the mainstream research is concerned. But all this presence tells us that yes, Chaul was very, very important during this period. Coming to our favorite author, for maritime students, we all know this book very, very easily. That is Periplus of the Erythraean Sea. So Periplus also talks about Chaul. Now here it talks about Chaul with referring to it as Simula. And it does give the location also. So many times as I was doing my research, I was told that Chaul is not the same as Simula, which is mentioned by Periplus, but Periplus also gives us the location. So what Periplus tells us that this port is to the north of Mandagora and to the south of Kalyan. So it can be nothing else but Chaul. And that's what stands, the archaeological evidences that have been found here also stand testimony to it. So as I mentioned before, that there were archaeological excavations conducted at Chaul, and there were 3 very, very interesting group of coins that were found. There were Satvahana coins, which can be assigned to Vashishtiputri Pulamavi, going back to the 2nd century CE. Similarly, we also find other coins of the Mahabhojas, which are also present here. And there are other coins which mention a ruler known as Shri Rajaditya, who is traced to 4th, 5th century. So these are the 3 important coins that we also found during the excavations. Similarly, there have been several potsherds and pottery pieces that have been found. So you have monochrome glazeware coming in from here. You have the blue and white, the Chinese pottery coming from here. So all this is also found at Chaul during the excavations, which tells us that yes, there was trade going back over here. But this is about the ancient period. Now going ahead, if we come to 600 CE to 1526 CE. So over here, Chaul was visited by several people from all over the world. Chaul saw several travelers. The first one who came in 7th century was the Chinese monk whom we all know as Winzang. He calls this place as Chimolo. And Chimolo because he says that there are great riches which come from the sea over here. Similarly, Chaul is referred in several Arab travelers. This period sees a lot of Arab travelers coming to Chaul. The first one is Al-Masudi. He goes on to say that yes, Chaul was under the governorship of local prince, and this ruler is affiliated to the Nadan Shilaharas. He also goes on to say that yes, there were 10,000 Muslims in Chaul at that time, which automatically tells us that yes, a different group of Muslims were already here in Chaul at this time. It goes on to say that there was a Jama Masjid also. So even if this 10,000 Muslims is a very, very big number, it might be an exaggeration, but still it goes on to tell us that yes, it was a sizable number of another community which is present at Chaul. Al-Masudi also tells us that there was a fire temple of the Zoroastrians, a church, a synagogue, and also many other temples. Now, many other temples is also very, very important over here, because some other sources also tell us that Chaul at one time had almost 600 temples. So it still is a very, very exaggerated figure, but we can understand that yes, it was a very important center for religions also. Al-Biruni says that it was a chief port of Western India and places it on an equal footing with Bharuch, Sanjan, Sopara, and Thana. So all these were very important commercial centers, and he places them on an equal footing with Chaul. Chaul in the somewhere around the 13th century came under the Yadavas of Devgiri. And this is also proven by the fact that there is a presence of an inscription of the Yadavas of Devgiri going back to Ramchandra Dev Yadav. This is a Gadegal that has been found over there. This is an Asker stele. So it was documented by Miss Harshada Virkud, and I'm thankful to her for this picture. She has been documenting Gadegals in this area, and she had found this one which goes to Ramchandra Dev Yadav. So it was found in a place called as Modakwadi. Somewhere after that, we also find the presence of a very small ruler, a single ruler dynasty called as Hambir Rao, who ruled from a place called as Thane Konkan. And he ruled over Thane Konkan from a place called as Mahim. And there are his inscriptions also, which are seen very close to Chaul at a place called as Nagaon, which is to the north of Chaul. Somewhere around the 14th century, Chaul fell in the hands of army of Alauddin Khilji, because he was the one ruling in the north. And this period is also seen because it led to the fall of Devgiri. That's how it came under the hands of the Khilji dynasty. Now this tells us that Chaul changed a lot of hands. A lot of dynasties were ruling Chaul at this point in time. And again, the importance of Chaul is something which is very highlighted and comes to light very easily. After the Khiljis, for a brief period, it was under the Khiljis. Then it passed down to the Bahmanis, who became a very, very important power in the south of India. So from 1380 onwards, it became their chief port. In fact, the historian Farishta also tells us this, that yes, it was their chief port from 1380s to almost 1398. And during this period, Chaul sees a new traveler. Now this traveler, his name is Afanasi Nikitin, who comes from Russia. He comes somewhere around 1470 CE, and he has written a diary called as Journey of Beyond the Three Seas. And in this book, he has described the life, the traditions, the cities of India somewhere around the 15th century. He wanted to visit Vijayanagar because he had heard about it widely, and therefore he went to Vijayanagar via Chaul. He gives the name to Chaul as Chivli. And he was very, very fascinated by Chaul. The thing that surprised him the most is that Chaul has such a prosperous trade. And in fact, the site of the port was so beautiful, it was so prosperous, it was so rich. He was fascinated by it. He says that the people living here wore silk. And then when he enters the mainland of Chaul, he sees the exact opposite. So he describes that over here, people wore very few clothes. They were almost naked. Their heads and chests were bare, and they showed round bellies. So that's how detailed he explains about Chaul. He also goes on to say that they were very fascinated by looking at a white man at that point of time. And in fact, he was a source of wonder for them. There were children who would run behind him all the way whenever he was in Chaul, whenever he was walking here and there. He also says that they were a source of fascination for him, seeing the stark contrast between the port side and the land side. So he goes on to talk about that as well. He has given detailed descriptions of Chaul, and today we see in one of the schools in Chaul, there's a monument that stands in his memory. So there's a school called as Rao Bahadur Tendulkar High School in Revdanda, which has a monument dedicated to his memory. Nikitin also tells us that yes, during this time, the Bahamanis ruled over Chaul. There was a local ruler who was taking care. And he also goes on to explain us about Muhammad Gawan, who was taking care of the empire at that time. So from the Bahamani Empire, as we all know, Bahamani Empire is split into 5 different Shahis of Deccan. So we have the Adil Shahi, we have the Nizam Shahi, we have the Parid Shahi, we have the Qutub Shahi. So all these 5 dynasties was what was the Bahamani dynasty split up into. And out of all these 5, Chaul went to the Nizam Shahi. This Nizam Shahi dynasty helped to flourish Chaul. This entire period saw Chaul flourishing and becoming the best port of the Nizam Shahi period. Now, what I want to you all to understand is that this is Chaul over here. And over here, you can see that there are routes going hinterland to places like Daulatabad, to places like Aurangabad, to Junnar, to Nasik. So entire trade route went hinterland also. So this place, this port of Chaul also became important for taking goods from the hinterland to Chaul and then to other parts of the world. Similarly, goods coming to Chaul and then taking them back to hinterland was also very important. So as Adil Shahi's prominent port is Dabhol, similarly, Nizam Shahi's prominent port becomes Chaul at this point in time. So it became the principal port. Now, this period also saw a lot of differences in the entire empire because it saw the entrance of the Portuguese coming to Chaul. When the Portuguese come to Chaul, they treated all the Muslims over here as their enemies. A small commander of Portuguese with the name of Dom Lorenzo de Almeida, he was the son of the local viceroy, who came over here in search of an enemy's fleet and came to Chaul. He anchored very close to the coast of Chaul with 10 ships. He destroyed all the Nizam Shahi ships. And this caused a lot of destruction on the port. This led to the Nizam Shahi making a small peace treaty with the Portuguese and promising them an yearly sum of 2,000 gold parados in return for the protection of their ships. So this period also saw the emperor of Ahmednagar Sultanate being Burhan Shah, and trade grew by leaps and bounds. So only for a certain period, yes, the Portuguese were given money. Later on, Portuguese come back, we will see that also. But this period, in the Nizam Shahi period especially, sees the flourishing of Chaul. So a lot of structures come up here in Chaul during this time. The first picture that you see over here is from a Hammam Khana. Now, Hammam Khana is a bath. In this Hammam Khana, we see there are arrangements for hot water, there are arrangements for cold water, and at the same time, there are clay taps. So this is something that was never seen before in this part of the area, although baths are very common to the Shahis, but this place has a bath, especially this area. Next to the bath, very, very close to the bath, is another place which is locally known as Kalavantini's Mahal. Kalavantini means a courtesan, and it is her palace is what is locally known as. Now, this is the local legend. But when we see the name of the village is called as Sarai. And this strikes a very important thing. that if it is called a sarai, can it be a sarai for the traders? And yes, it was a sarai for the traders to come here, to take rest, to have their goods over here, and it was a safe place for them. So there's a big area over here. Behind this, there is a water tank, which has access to fresh water for this sarai. It's a huge place wherein people could stop and rest with their goods. Also, one of the neglected facts of Chaul is that there was a presence of a mint over here. Mint is also known as a zarb. So there is a reference to something known as zarb Murtazabad that we see during this period. Now, Murtazabad is also affiliated to Miraj by some scholars, but we understand that it is none other than Chaul, because one of the Nizam Shahi emperors was Murtaza, and his son Burhan II had issued coins from this mint called as Zarb Murtazabad. And we obviously know that this Burhan can be none other than Burhan II. And therefore, we can definitely say that, yes, the coins come from Zarb Murtazabad. That is Chaul. The Nizam Shahis also had milestones installed in Chaul, which once again takes us to the fact that, yes, it was an important center and there were distances being counted from this place to other places, which will tell us about the trade going here, the flourishing trade going on here. There were merchants coming all the way from the Gulf countries, Baghdad, Basra, Oman, Siraf, who were here, who were trading over here. We had ships coming all the way from Egypt, from the Red Sea ports, and they called it Chaul. So from this period, we also get this name of Chaul along with the name of Murtazabad. Archaeological evidences also tell us that there are special kinds of beads, which are known as trade wind beads, which are especially made in India and traded all over the Indo-Pacific region, which are also found in the places of Egypt and all the Gulf countries, which tells us that, yes, they did went from here and there was a trade which was going on from this place. There are also mosques that we see in Chaul. So there are several mosques, but this one is the most prominent. This is at a great height in Chaul itself, which tells us that it could be seen from the port very easily. There are 2 tombs inside, which also tells us that this mosque was made in 2 different phases. And this mosque also has 2 inscriptions. One of them is traced to, again, Burhan Shah II. The architecture of this mosque is traced back to the Nizam Shahis, and this is only one of the 2 surviving mosques of the Nizam Shahis that we can see in this part. So that makes this mosque very, very important. Coming back to the Portuguese. So Portuguese and the Nizam Shahis had made their own peace while being here. In fact, now the Portuguese decided to start their own trade from this place. Somewhere around the 1600s, we see that, yes, the Portuguese were given to the permission to make a factory at Chaul. And they also decided to fortify this area. So they all established a fort known as Revdanda over here. So this is a Portuguese map that you see. This is the fort. They called it Fortaleza de Chaul, and they fortified this part. This is the Revdanda fort today. On the opposite hillock, they also made another small fort, which is known as the Korlai fort, which they also called as Murud Chaul. This is the mouth of the Kundalika river from where you enter Chaul. So basically, the entire mouth of the river was made impregnable by the Portuguese by making these 2 forts. Now, anybody who wanted to enter Chaul had to take permission from the Portuguese. In fact, Basin and Chaul became the parts of Estodad, India, which means the empire of India of the Portuguese. So this way, if we entered Chaul, there was a Portuguese fleet, which would stand here, which would issue cartages. Now, cartages was something known as licenses, that whenever one tried to enter this part, they would issue you a particular type of licenses, which had to be purchased. And one ship of the Portuguese would only recognize their licenses. So it means that every ship had a separate kind of a license, which had to be paid off. This became a basic toll facility for the Portuguese, and it became their own personal area, that anybody who wanted to enter this part would have to take permission from the Portuguese. This also led to the beginning of two different settlements in Chaul. So the lower Chaul was affiliated to the Christians. Similarly, the upper Chaul was affiliated to the Muslims. So the upper Chaul came to be known as the Musalman Chaul, and the lower Chaul came to be known as the Portuguese Chaul. So you can see the stark difference in the two group of communities and the two Chauls, the two communities, two settlements at Chaul that we see in this map. These are some of the pictures that we see of Chaul. So here is the Revdanda Fort. These pictures are from the Revdanda Fort that we see. This is from the seaside of the Revdanda Fort itself. Here is another very interesting or a fascinating thing about the fort of Revdanda is that you see a Portuguese crown at the top. This crown tells us that this is only place where we have a Portuguese period. There are only 3 forts which have something like this, and Chaul has the biggest one. This is the fort of Parle that I just showed you in the map previously, which is on the opposite hillock of the Chaul. So Chaul continued being under the Nizam Shahis and the Portuguese. After the Nizam Shahis, we see that Chaul becomes a personal Jagir of Shahaji Bhosle. So Shahaji Bhosle, who is the father of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, owns the territory of Chaul. He owns an area which gives him an annual earning of 20 lakh gold coins every year. And from 20 lakh, 11 lakh come from Konkan, and a majority of it comes from Chaul. So it becomes his personal Jagir for a brief period. Later on, after this, it is when the Nizam Shahis and the Adil Shahis die out, it is given to the Mughals. He has to share it with the Mughals. Although the Mughals later on do not give it back to Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, it then comes under the Mughals. So after coming to the Mughals, Chaul continues to be a very, very important site. In fact, somewhere around the 1600s, 1670s, we still see that Chaul has a group of people who are weavers who make taftis. So taftis is a very, very beautiful type of a fabric that we see that is made. And these taftis were, at least there were 5,000 people who made taftis in Chaul at this period. Chaul also sees a lot of communities coming here. So we have the Bene Israeli Jews. We also have the population of Muslims. We have Christians. We have Hindus. And there are several temples that we see in Chaul during this period. So we have the temples like Rameshwar temple, we have the Bhimeshwar temple. They are all mentioned by different travelers who come to Chaul during this period and talk about it. So by this period, the Marathas and Portuguese have established their peace over here. When the port of Chaul finally comes under the Peshwas, it also comes under Kanoji Angre for a brief period of time, then under the Peshwas, under Chimaji Appa. So this is the tomb of Kanoji Angre is also seen at Chaul at this time.
There has been a technical glitch. Riddhi will be back in few minutes. Sorry for the inconvenience.
Hello, Yogini, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. Sorry, I lost my network. 1 minute.
I thought you are prone to Chaul only. कि बस अभी बहुत हो गया बोल के मैं जा रही हूँ Chaul अभी उधर से ही दिखाऊंगी.
Yeah, I think I'll switch off my camera only. That will be better.
हाँ चलेगा.
1 minute. What was the last thing that you heard? Hello?
पेशवा के बारे में you were saying ना?
Okay. So yes, as I was telling that Kanoji Angre was buried here. We also see that it came under Peshwa Chimaji Appa also for a brief period of time. And all temple been.
Yes. Sorry to disturb, you are not on slideshow, so we can see something like Chaul through the years and everything. So just go to slideshow.
Acha, okay, 1 minute. It's not giving me option of slideshow. 1 minute. Now?
Yes.
Hello?
Yes. You can start.
Okay. So now I was talking about the temples in Chaul. So we have the Rameshwar temple, the pink temple that you see over here. It's one of the most famous temples in Chaul. There are several references that we find in this temple, and something very fascinating about all the temples in Chaul, and this is very, very typical, is that you see a water tank in front of all these temples. There is a huge Pushkarani in front of all these temples. Somewhere around 1625, we have a traveler who comes and talks about this temple also. And he says that there were several people who used to come here, who used to pray here, which tells us that yes, this temple was here, at least if not in this form, then maybe in a very, very primitive form. But yes, it does tell us that there was a temple over here. And it also talks about this water tank in front. There are also references that at one time there were somewhere around 600 temples in Chaul. But even if there were not 600 temples, still a sizable community of people were living at Chaul during this time. So moving ahead, when we see all this journey of Chaul through the years, starting from the 2nd century BC to 1900s, what happens to Chaul after this? Why is Chaul not discussed today? So we all know that Bombay started rising as a port after the fall of Surat. So the rise of Bombay as a port saw the shifting of several factories to Chaul, to Bombay. So Chaul started declining as a port. Similarly, the course of the Kundalika River also changed. It started silting up, which also led to a lot of travelers not coming to Chaul now. This list that I've put up here is a list of all the travelers and in which year they came and how did they describe Chaul. What was the name that they gave to Chaul? If you count this list, it comes to somewhere around 30 different travelers. Now, again, once over here, I have not mentioned all the travelers. I have at least taken the 30 different travelers that came to Chaul during this period. but there are several others which I have not put over here. In fact, during the coronation of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, Henry Oxenden also had stayed at the fort of Revdanda. So this tells us that the site was very, very important during that point also. So this site of Chaul started declining after the coming up of Bombay and the silting of the river of Kundalika. The present day site of Chaul is far, far ahead of the site which originally was. Today, there are several communities over here. We have the Jains, which are one of the major communities who are into money lending and grocery business. The place of Parle speaks a very, very different kind of a language. It speaks a kind of a Creole, which is a mix of different languages. And this is widely spoken in this village of Parle over here. It is a mixture of Konkani, Marathi, and Portuguese language. This small community of Christians also have local songs, also have local heritage, local literature, which is in Chaul. So this is a very intangible part of Chaul that we also see during this time. Another community of Chaul, which is a community of silk weavers, has migrated to Bombay. And how do we know that this was a community of people from Chaul? Is because of their surname. And most of them have this surname called as Mumbai Chevli Bhanushali Mahajan. So they use these words for their community. And this tells us that, yes, they came in from Chaul. Chaul became a center wherein a lot of weavers, a lot of people dealing with fabrics started living here. Today, it has a mix of a lot of socio-cultural environment is a mixture of cosmopolitan culture. We also see that people over here speak several different languages. Creole, yes, definitely. But there are several other languages also which are spoken here. We have the Patskarshis here. We have the Bhandari community here. We have the Kunbis. We have the Sonars. We have the Kolis. So all of them live here. There are several pockets or mohallas that have come here. There are Jews who have come here, who have continued their business. So Jews were in the oil extraction business over here. And we find a burials of the Bene Israelis also in Chaul. This history of Chaul tells us that, yes, it has a lot of potential to become one of a cosmopolitan, rich heritage site. It can be researched through different perspectives, through community perspective, through historical perspective, through archaeological perspective, through epigraphical perspective. And it has a long history. It has a history going on from the 2nd century BC till the present period. However, there is a great lack of awareness as far as this site is concerned. As I myself told you, before doing this research, I was not aware of the importance of this site. But later on, I got to know. So you name the dynasty and you have a presence of the dynasty here. You name the important dynasties, you mentioned the Mughals, the Portuguese, the British, the French, the Marathas, the Yadavas, all the Satvahanas are all present here. Some or the other way, they all have their presence here. So this tells us that there is a lack of awareness among us about such sites. And coming back to our celebration of heritage, why did I choose this site? Why did I talk about this site? Is because the sheer amount of data that has been coming from such smaller sites also needs to be understood. For heritage, it does not need to be very, very prominent. It does not always have to be places like Taj Mahal, or it does not have to be greater places. It can be a small place. It can tell you loads of things, and loads of things are related to your heritage. Today, a site like Mumbai also can be researched in different ways. Similarly, a site of Chaul also has a great potential to be researched in different ways. It is our heritage, and it should be given importance equally as all the other types of heritage. Yes, it is not possible to, make every site a World Heritage Site. But even if it is a local site, if local people come ahead, if people like us who know about it come ahead and we research things like these, it will be very, very good to take it ahead through a different perspective. This list that I've put here was only to tell you that how many people have talked about Chaul. And in spite of so many people talking about Chaul, how less we know. Which tells us that, yes, there is a great need to talk about Chaul today. It is not just a site for scenic beauty. People visit Alibag and do not visit Chaul. But it is not just a site for scenic beauty, but it has a true potential for history, for archaeology, for epigraphy, and so many different types of research that can go hand in hand when we talk about Chaul. So before I end this presentation for today, there are several people that I have to thank for doing this research. First of all, my research guide for MA thesis, Professor Neeta Khandpekar, Dr. Kurush Dalal, Dr. Pushkar Sohani, who always was helping me for this research. At the same time, the late Dr. Mahesh Kalra, who also helped me to find out about Zarb Murtazabad. My friends Yogini Atreya and Sozwar Sari, who helped me in tracing the epigraphical record of Chaul. So without all these people, it wouldn't have been possible. Similarly, Prashant Gharat, who was there helping me during the COVID period, giving me photos, giving me local information, because it was not possible for me to go to the site. So without all these people, it was not possible for me to do this research. So thank you so much. And just before going, I would just like to tell you that every site has potential. It's up to us to treat it as heritage and give it importance. Also, I would like to tell you that tomorrow we are going to look at a very, very different perspective. I'm not going to reveal the topic that is there for tomorrow, but we are going to see a very different perspective of Indian heritage, and I don't want you to miss that. So please do come tomorrow at 5 p.m. and listen to that as well. We also have a fabulous lineup of courses coming in. So we have Persian uniform, which is going on, but you can still sign up for it. We have from 3rd December, we have a very interesting nature trail of Rani Bagh at Bhaikala with Dr. Lattu and Dr. Salunke. On 4th of December, we have a gaming session in the Mandapeshwar Caves of Borivali by Project Helia. So we'll be gaming over there. We'll be playing games. We'll be telling you about how games travel from different places, how they've come to India, how they went from India. From 5th to 16th December, we will go all the way to Southeast Asia by dealing with the civilizations, by talking with civilizations all around the world with Dr. Kurush Dalal. On 17th and 18th of December, we'll be going to the forts of Konkan. We'll be covering Kolaba, Revdanda, Korlai, and Zanjira. Going ahead with the destination courses. So we had one on Hampi. Now we'll be soon having another one on Khajuraho. We will also visit the caves of Elephanta on 8th January. And in January, we have several other caves lined up. So we'll be going Parle and Bhaze with me and Yogini. And in February, we have a very interesting trip to Dholavira. So there are several things that we have been thinking of which will be coming up very, very soon. So please do watch this space. Follow us on Instagram, on Facebook, Twitter, and all the social media handles. Do follow us on our website. Do visit us on YouTube. There are several lectures that we have already put up, very interesting topics that you can go through, and keep learning with INSTUCEN. Thank you.